sign when the show's going off the rails before we even start recording. Oh, hi, Internet. It's Scott again. Welcome to the season premiere of the EveryJoe podcasts. Hashtag EJPC, your political safe space. Got a great show. I'm always nervous about calling it a fun show because the topic's kind of heavy, but we've got a panel of guests that's going to make it fun and make my job easy because I'm going to introduce something, go smoke a cigarette, come back an hour later. Joining us this week, you may have heard of this guy. He's kind of popular on Twitter. He does some stuff for Breitbart. He's from England. Milo Yiannopoulos. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I thought you were going to put my other most commonly given character attributes, such as shyness, self-effacing and demeanor, reluctance for the to get in front of a camera. I don't know.
You have a hard time coming out of your shell.
I do.
And also, and this is actually when they write the history of the EveryJoe podcast, there's gonna be a trivia question: who was the first guest to ever be on twice? That's our next guest. Still with the Washington Examiner, as she was last week. Still the star of the Fox News Christmas classic, The Truth About Sex in College, as she was the last time she was on. But now, as an official writer for the New York Post, my official paper of record, Ash Scow, welcome.
Hey.
So we're recording this on State of the Union Tuesday, but since there's already enough podcasts of people complaining about how much the president sucks, we figured, hey, let's talk about something less serious. What's been going on in Cologne, Germany, and apparently a similar issue in Sweden, where there were two incidences of mass sexual assaults being covered up by the police. Let's just say because the people who were committing the sexual assaults weren't exactly Methodists. But Ash, since this was the topic of your Fox News, not Fox News, that's the other paper, your New York Post column, give us a little background. What's been going on in Germany?
Oh, God, New Year's Eve was just a nightmare for just hundreds and hundreds, possibly even thousands of women who were just out having a good time, walking home and just submitted to this gauntlet of these horrible men who just groped them and bruised them and sexually assaulted them, and at least 2 women have claimed to have been raped during this time. And of course they say that the men who were doing this were of Arab and North African descent. So of course then you have the German authorities leap into action to kind of first not report it, second to leave out the nationality, and then third to start attacking people who go after the asylum seekers who were accused to have done this. So you really have this complete meltdown on the left between these groups that want to say sexual assault victims they just need their stories told and they need to be believed and you can't victim blame. And then the group that just holds Muslims up to this higher standard of this pedestal where you can't touch them.
Okay. Now, Milo, I know you're tight with the feminist community. When are they actually planning the protest about this?
Best friends.
Because obviously there has to be a protest going on because this definitely sounds like victim blaming and slut shaming and all the other buzzwords. So
we had a meeting about it, and we actually thought that what with all of the urgent and necessary problems policing manspreading and mansplaining by white male college students, that we actually don't have time to get to the molestation and alleged rape of hundreds of German women, but we're gonna get to it. That's what the girls tell me.
Sure, once you solve all the other problems in the world, right? Big epidemic.
I mean, to hear modern feminists, you'd imagine, they're going to be, if they'd solved everything in America, which of course would never happen because they'll never be happy, they would be looking around their living rooms for loose light bulbs before they would dare talk about Muslims.
Right.
They would
Exactly.
have a word to say about, this is the thing. I mean, some of your listeners will be familiar with this phrase, rape culture, an invention of the left, which of course doesn't exist in the West.
It's reality in general.
Well, here's the thing.
No, it exists among Muslims. It happened. We saw it in Cologne.
Okay.
That is a rape culture because you had to accept all these refugees. You couldn't say no to them, and you couldn't bring up that they're coming from a culture where women are treated as chattel, as property, as lesser than men, as basically there to be screwed and make dinner. And you weren't allowed to bring
And
that
that's
up.
my
And then
job.
they came over
I'm
to
there to
Germany.
be crude and make dinner. I want women to be out working, so I don't have to anymore. You know, I want to be like a gay lady of leisure. You know, I want to return to the good old days of the 1950s. You know, women go out to work. You know, my husband goes out to work, and I can stay home and look after the kids and like polish the house and do the bridge club. You know, I want women out doing and empowered and you know, and able to go and do all of the things they want to do, to make space for me in bridge club and you know, and make space for me at the, you know, in the knitting societies. There's a serious point to all this, which is, of course, as Ash says, you know, there isn't a rape culture in the West. There certainly isn't one, you know, on the most privileged white educational spaces. These are liberal-run colleges, which are apparently hotbeds of racism, sexism, and transphobia, all the rest of it. You know, but there is one in the Middle East. There is a problem with Islamic culture, and it's the reason that I wrote a column. Something along the lines of I'm a gay man and mass Muslim immigration terrifies me. I'm not just worried about ISIS. I'm not just worried about Islamic radicals. I'm worried about Muslims. Now, that's a very controversial thing to say, and it's the sort of thing that you wouldn't really be able to get away with on, you know, on network television. But I'll tell you why. You know, I've lost count of the number of countries. Is it 11, 12 or 13 Muslim countries where I could be killed just for being who I am? We're not talking about ISIS, you know, beheading gay people. We're talking about Iran hanging them off cranes, or gay people who get killed, or whatever else, you know, in mainstream Muslim society. Look at the surveys that are done. 0% of Muslims reporting in the UK that they find homosexuality an acceptable lifestyle choice. Those sorts of statistics are unprecedented. The level of bigotry and you know, and the attitudes towards women and homosexuals and, you know, anything that isn't a man among these cultures is remarkable. And why Europe wanted to import all of these people in defiance of the obvious facts that women and other minorities were going to suffer, I can't work it out. I don't have too much. I mean, I don't worry too much about the gays because we tend to always land on our feet, but it's women that I'm worried about, really. It's women, you know, when you look at what's happened in Sweden, and you look at, you know, the government and the media, of course, they're covering it all up too. But you know, it's very difficult actually to find out what the truth, just how bad things really are in Sweden. I mean, we know, for example, that it's the rape capital of Europe now, but we don't really know very much more than that. Why? Because the government is so paralyzed with panic about being accused of racism and so caught up in political correctness that it's passed new rules where the police reports don't even mention the ethnicity or race of the assailant anymore. So you can't even get statistics on what proportion of the huge epidemic of rape in Malmö in Sweden is perpetrated by non-whites, is perpetrated by immigrants. Sweden can't even tell you anymore. Now, something is going fundamentally wrong with the judicial system when you are asking for less data, not more, for political reasons. That cannot be right. And you know, being a woman in Sweden, I mean, I wouldn't want to have a wife or kids there, and I don't want other countries to turn into these places either. And it astonishes me. I'm so shocked and so horrified and so just confused about progressive feminist activists who have spent their life being the sort of cowardly bullies they are, picking on easy, weak targets like gamers and college students, and yet faced with a genuine example of rape culture, faced with an example, you know, faced with something where they could actually help to protect women, where they could stand up and speak out. The number of feminists who do are a tiny, noble minority, rather than the angry majority who, if their voices were raised in unison, could actually do something. It horrifies me. And I think it underscores the extent to which modern intersectional third wave feminism has become a sort of rich white girls female chauvinism.
Right.
Christina Half Summers likes to call it female chauvinism, but it isn't just that. It's rich white girl female chauvinism, and they just don't care about women. They don't care about women.
Right.
All they want to do is hate men.
Well, it's funny because it's suddenly now, well, we don't know that they were asylum seekers, and let's wait for the evidence and the facts to come in, where suddenly they care about evidence and facts. But if it was David Fromm had said, if it had been, white fraternity boys, nope, out the window, hang them all up to dry. And it's what I wrote about in my New York Post article, which was basically that the left has this pyramid of grievances. And I used to think that white female sexual assault accusers were like way up there, but now we just learned from Cologne that it's Muslims are at the very top. Sexual assault accusers are below that, and then blacks, Hispanics, gays, lesbians, transgender, all further down.
And where I think it really gets sad is that it never seems to be enough for the left. It's not enough for me to support gay marriage. I have to hate anyone who disagrees with me on it. It's not enough for me. It's not enough for me to say that rape is a heinous crime that should be punishable by something cruel and unusual punishment, or putting you in prison with a sign around your neck that says, "Guess what? I'm a rapist." I have to like any stupid symbolic like gesture that they decide to make like a social media thing. I have to either like say is the greatest thing ever, or I'm a rape apologist. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that if you don't go out and actively do what they're telling you to do, then your silence is, acceptance or whatever, where it's like it's not enough to live your life correctly or to say these things at various times. You have to be somehow at every protest everywhere, supporting every single cause, and especially you got to let everybody know on social media with a hashtag that you're doing so, because otherwise you're being silent and therefore you're giving in to the patriarchy or the racist or whatever else they want to call you.
It's remarkable the weird sense of priorities these people have too. I mean, it's the same names pop up again and again and again when you see journalists who are, furiously insisting on public support for Black Lives Matter, furiously insisting on campus rape culture, the wage gap, or indeed the transgender issue. And the funny thing is, this is what I never understood about the political left in America, is that, Muslims are at the top, I think indisputably at the top of the sort of grievance pyramid. Why? How? How did this happen? It seems to be that the left rewards people the worse they behave. I mean, Muslims are the ultimate cry bullies. They complain about hijab pulling and Islamophobia whilst flying planes into buildings in New York. Now, fine, it's not all of them, but there's no allowance made for the understandable concern that some people might have about large numbers of niqabbed women walking moving into their areas. No, Muslims have to be protected from censor, which I don't get. And the skewed sense of priorities goes into the transgender issue, the dirty secret nobody wants to talk about, but nobody wants to admit the transgender thing. Nobody cares. No one cares. Like, I don't care. In fact, I actively don't want to hear about it. It's not that I'm even indifferent to the transgender show. I don't want to hear about you cutting your nads off. Like, why would I want to spend my time thinking about that? But I've been forced into making a political stand on it, right? Because it's everywhere. It's on the cover of Time magazine. The New York is everywhere in the media. And it becomes a sort of challenge. They'll put it in front of you and they'll dare you to make the wrong decision. They'll say, here is an issue which we are not going to allow you to ignore, because we're going to put on all of the TV programs and awards shows and magazines. And here is what you will think about it. Comply. And they stand and wait with their hand outstretched for you to say the right thing about it. And if you don't, all hell breaks loose.
Right. You see that with feminism too, where every young actress has to be asked, are you a feminist? And if you have someone like Kaylee Cuoco from The Big Bang Theory who says, no, I'm not, and I think the word's kind of toxic, oh my God, the backlash, the vilification you get, as if you are actively stringing up women and taking away their rights, when it's just, no, I think the word has become toxic nowadays, which a lot, most people actually do, because now to be a feminist is to be someone who is constantly angry at something and constantly blaming men for all of the problems in the world and inventing new problems to blame men for. Oh, I got drunk in a party and I had sex with someone. Well, it's not my fault, it's his fault. Like, he raped me. Now it's just everything is something a man's fault. Where now you take the gender pay gap is one of my favorites, because you point out that it's due to the choices women are free to make in their careers. And it's like, well, women are only making those choices because men are telling them to do so. And it's like, do you really think women have no brains? Like, everything just kind of goes back to this idea that women can't do anything for themselves.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, you again ready to settle down just becoming a horse trainer and a housewife until we all sat down and told you, no, you have to become a journalist.
That's not far off from what actually happened. So it was all set to be a part-time writer and a wife, and then you get dumped and you decide, oh, you got to go do something with your life so that doesn't happen again.
Feel for you. No,
I know. Please feel bad for me. It was so awful. It was a man, right?
Great.
I'm a victim.
They'll always attack any woman who says like feminism is bad or disagree with that. I notice how none of them had the courage to go up against Ronda Rousey. When she
the fact is that
now she supports Bernie Sanders, so they love her.
Most people don't agree with, don't identify as feminists. What is it now? 18% of women in the US now identify as a feminist, down from 28 just a couple of years ago. When an actress is bullied into taking a stand on this, taking a stance on it, and says, "I'm not a feminist," she's reflecting the opinions of 4/5 of women. But of course, she becomes persona non grata in the press.
Right. Well, one of the things I love about one of the most recent polls on that found 18% was that these women's group were sending it out and saying, oh, but if you tell them that feminism means equality and you give the very sanitized, specific, positive definition, 50% identify as it. But it's like, no, that's not what the word means anymore. It doesn't mean equality of opportunity. It means equality of outcomes and blaming men.
But isn't it amazing how the word is so toxic that even after you've defined it as equality, only 50% of women will go there?
That is beautiful.
Do you believe in equality? Most people are like, what would you get? Like 80, 90% of people would say, yeah. Or just like ask you to clarify a bit, but then probably be like, well, equality of like opportunity and like equal access to everything. Well, yeah, sure. What did you get? Like, would you get 90% of people? Would you get more? But feminism as a word, and this is the fault of the responsibility for this rests solely at the feet of feminists, has become so toxic a word that even when you tell people it means equality, they don't believe you. And you only get every other woman will say, okay, I'm a feminist. It's amazing.
It's because it's just the constant complaining and just constantly finding fault in everything. I mean, we can take it back to Gamergate with these, cultural feminist scolds who game developers know that they're going to come and they're not going to be searching for anything positive. They're going to be searching something. Some most recent example I have is the whole Linkle debacle, where they said they're going to announce a female link, and all these feminists were saying, "Yay, finally!" And then of course they created a female link, and they're like, "Oh, what the heck are you doing? That's all wrong." And it's like, you are never going to be happy. Like you are going there to find fault with people, and it is very obvious, and people don't want to believe you, and they obviously don't take you seriously anymore.
Well, the issue...
Not you, Milo, then.
No, I know, darling. The issue for some people, I think, is that... it's the same thing with Call of Duty, right? They made a female playable, first-person playable character for Call of Duty, and then people started complaining that it encourages violence in young girls. It's like... the issue is if you set the bar for satisfaction... Did they not know what Call of Duty
was before that?
No, I know. They set the bar that you have to meet so impossibly high, or as is more often,
they move it.
They simply don't tell you where it is because it's above the cloud somewhere. They move it. Most people will say, well, you know what? Since you're never going to be satisfied, I'm just going to do what I want. And that's the situation that not only I think all men are now in, bar a tiny sliver of weird goony beard men in the media and a couple in various industries. But aside from most men are just like, you know what? I'm out. I can't be bothered with this. But 4/5 of women too. I mean, that's an amazing indictment after the incredible success of the feminist movement, which is one of the things that we should be most proud of in the West and most grateful to our ancestors for is the fight for women's equality, the vote, equal access for education, and all these other things that women now have and can now do. What a proud, wonderful, glorious history feminism has, and all the various different strands of feminism that have in the past been. All of this now has been sort of all of this is now coagulated into a grievance and victimhood based cult of failure and misandry. Because there's not very much to complain about left, and the only people who are still feminists are the fat ones, the ugly ones, and the lessers. Because there's really nothing left to complain about. And I think most women who want a boyfriend and don't hate men read this stuff at Jezebel. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine like an ordinary housewife or a young girl starting college who hasn't been poisoned by this stuff yet? Just imagine what goes through their mind when they read Jezebel, or when they read the commentary from one of these explicitly weird male feminist bloggers at, whether it's the Vox or Polygon or Mike or Gawker or Vox or any of the other millions of well-funded, liberal media outlets. What goes through these people's mind? They must just think these people live in a different planet from me. Is it any wonder there's a gulf between the coastal US and the rest of the country when, people with common sense read this stuff and they're just like, what?
But it also ends up hurting women because you see like employers who don't want to be behind a closed door with a female employee. They don't want to make eye contact with female employees or talk to them in any, special way. Hey, you're doing a great job. If you accidentally put a hand on the shoulder, you could be accused. And it's all from this feminist stuff that are teaching women to accuse, and they are actually bringing these accusations. So it hurts women like me. It hurts women in college who every time they now meet a guy, he has to just be like, you're crazy and you might accuse me of rape, so I don't even want to talk to you. And then it also hurts women's sexuality, quite honestly, because this whole affirmative consent where you have to ask for permission for everything. Well, women don't want to be asked for permission. Like, may I kiss you? No, it's the biggest turnoff ever. They don't want that, and yet feminists are telling women you have to want that or else you're raped, telling them to be victims every step of the way, and that hurts women who don't think they're victims.
This is why you should listen to homosexuals more, because I'm perfectly happy to admit I don't want to be asked for permission. I want to be taken,
Right.
And all the women that I according to modern feminist doctrine, that would be rape, I guess. I want to be taken. I do want to be surprised. I want to be overpowered. Part of male sexuality is that danger, and if you're with somebody that you love and that you trust, part of that sort of some of the best sex involves that little frisson of risk and jeopardy. That's what makes it hot. And they deny all of that, of course. They're not interested in any of that. Did you read my? You might have missed it, but I'll tell you briefly. I wrote a piece about the open source software community, which sounds, but these are the guys these are the hackers who make the stuff that becomes Google Maps. So they're these sort of unsung heroes of the world because they, are sort of like. Most of it, most of them have a kind of set day job and a home job, and between their sort of various projects, they create these little bundles of code that end up in stuff that we use every day that basically our whole world relies on, like ATMs, cash machines and Google Maps. All of it at some point has been made by somebody in the open source software community, and The ADA initiative was a feminist organization who targeted men in the open source software community with honey traps, trying to to entrap them and lie about and to get women to go in and lie and say that they were sexually assaulted by people. Linus Torvalds, the inventor of the Linux kernel, who's an incredibly important figure in computing, he is, in terms of technological contribution to the computer industry, probably the equal of Bill Gates, although he hasn't made the money. Trying to entrap him in a honey trap. Now, this organization collapsed in on itself as a result of a lawsuit that, again, with fake rape allegations, turned out the founder had sent herself flowers and pretended that somebody had sent them to her as a part of stalking her because they checked the credit cards. How stupid are these people? Anyway, the Eric
That's
Raymond.
The listen and believe. Don't look into my accusation.
Don't look into my accusation. How dare you question my accusation? Well, here's the thing. What's now happened in the open source community, to what you said, men are now refusing to mentor young women. This is an example of the women in tech movement, the women in tech hysteria damaging women's chances. Like, what is the only way women are going to get great? If they've got great male mentors, or great mentors or whatever, but they've got great mentors helping them not just get a job, but become the best, because none of us rise to the top in our fields without great people around us to advise us. Men now won't mentor young women. And I'm sure it's not just that industry either. It's just the one that I've reported on most recently. Young women coming into the open source software, young hackers, young new developers, get in touch with people like Eric Raymond, and these guys will not touch them. They will not be in a room together with them. This is the clearest, most stark and horrifying example that I found in the last sort of 3 months of how feminism totally devastates the chances of women those few women who do want to go into the professions. They're always telling us we should have more women in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not just open source because it's Congress as well. I mean, there was the report out that male congressmen don't want to ever be alone with female staffers after driving them somewhere. And these are women who are very, very ambitious, and they're being cut out because of all these false accusations. They want to keep claiming that, oh, women don't lie about things, but they
and then
do
the feminists
all the time.
use that as an example. They'll say, "Oh well, why aren't women getting these opportunities? Why didn't you pick your female staff to drive you? Because I can't. Because I don't dare. You know, it's just great. It's Kafkaesque. It's Kafkaesque.
Right.
And it's one of those.
It's a complete disconnect.
Right, and Eric Raymond, the open source guy that I was talking about earlier, was talking about Kafka trapping, which is when your denial of a problem is used as evidence that you have a problem. Like, I'm not a racist. Oh, well, that's because you've got internalized racism. You're not aware of it. You know, the very fact that you deny that you're a racist, that you're not conscious of your racist actions, is evidence that you are not adequately treating racism as a problem. We see this with sexism as well. This is the kind of crazy position that modern American intersectional third-wave feminism has got itself into, the sort of weird, contorted logical loops that have led it, to get us back to our original subject, have led modern feminism to start privileging cry-bully Muslim spokespeople and the idiot white collaborators in the media over women who are getting raped. And in just one I'll say one more thing. The most horrifying example of where this has gone wrong was a German interior minister, which some of your listeners will have heard of this already. A German interior minister, male feminist, typical German male feminist, who said that the real problem wasn't women being assaulted. The real problem was right-wing platforms and chat rooms on the internet. And he said that what happens in right-wing chat rooms was at least as awful as what happened in Cologne.
Right. Words are violence, remember?
What?
Well, we also saw that's what happened right after Cologne, where like the first step wasn't, hey, we need to rethink our immigration laws because all of these reports are saying that it's the asylum seekers. No, their first step was to start cracking down on alleged hate speech against asylum seekers. And then you have Merkel,
and telling women how to behave.
A week after Merkel finally comes out and says, okay, we've got to rethink our immigration laws, not to make it more difficult for dangerous people to come into the country, but to make it easier to kick them out once they've already victimized somebody. So it's like, you can come here and victimize somebody and then go home, is basically what the policy is now.
I loved also the mayor of Cologne, like the day afterwards, who suddenly started literally victim blaming. She was saying, well, with women, women should, I'm going to issue like a code of conduct for women so they don't, but so you can stay like an arm's length away.
If you're walking in the street, stay an arm's length away, because that's going to stop somebody.
It's going to stop a rapist. It's like, why don't you go the whole hog? Why don't you just ask women to go around in niqabs? Why don't we just do that? If you really want women to be safe, why aren't they in burqas?
Or just stay home. What do you want to be a victim? Why are you leaving your house?
If you want to leave the house, you need a male companion, and suddenly we start to see Germany turn into much hotter, much more bleak countries far to the east.
I mean, that's what they're letting them in, and then they're telling women to act like the women in those countries. Maybe that has been the plan all along. Maybe they're looking at those countries and saying, you know what?
They've got it right.
They got the answers.
They've got it right. Well, I always make this joke about, that's the only thing the Saudis get right is the ban on female drivers, But maybe, well, you can get to the right conclusions for the wrong reasons sometimes. But maybe Merkel has looked out on the Islamic world, and maybe she's a secret red pillar. I've got this theory that Angela Merkel is a secret red pillar. She's actually like a Rouge V devotee, and she's looking out on these heavily patriarchal societies in the Middle East where the man rules and he's got multiple wives and women, all this. Do you know Germany would be better if we were like that? Women should be back in the home. We need to return to real pay. This is the only explanation. It's the only explanation for her immigration policy.
Well, that's what I love so much about the left's love of Muslims, is that you look in these countries and you look at their policies, their hatred of homosexuality, treatment of women, and it's all the things that the left claims the right wants and does, and then this adherence to a religion to the point of wanting to kill people over it. Like, it's all these things that the left blames the right for, and yet they love it. It's like they love it. It makes no sense to me. It's like, what? They're against everything you claim to stand for.
I know.
Like, where is it
And
coming from?
and to be completely clear, again, and I have to make this point. I mean, you invoke my gay privilege card to make this point, but like, it's not just terrorists; it's all of them. Look at the Pew Global data about attitudes towards homosexuality, attitudes towards women, attitudes towards, you know, our allies Israel, you know, whatever it is, any kind of liberal value you hold dear, free speech, you name it. Yes, there are Muslim countries that don't conform to this, but they're not where we're taking immigrants from. And, you know, look at the attitudes of Muslims in our own countries, like generations in, right? Like third generation Muslims in the UK saying that 0% of them saying that homosexuality is an acceptable, like, moral.
What it also is, I'm going to do the hashtag not all Muslims, that there are some that are very for freedom. And at the same time, nothing we've said here means that anybody should go out and attack a Muslim. Like, that's something that also appears to have been happening since Cologne, is that there's been some sort of retaliation against asylum seekers. And again, I'm going to say due process and evidence.
The response has been remarkable in its timidity, frankly. If you consider the scale of what's happened, the 7/7 attacks in London, what happened afterwards? Nothing. 2 people got their hijabs pulled off, and 1 guy attacked a mosque. That was it? Really? Like, I would say we should, you know, it's not going to congratulate anybody that does stuff like that. Obviously, it's awful, but the responses to this stuff, you know, always remarkable in its timidity. Look at France, the hug a Muslim in France, you know, in the middle of Paris after those attacks. We don't respond like they respond. Yet we're, you know, the ugly flag of Islamophobia is, you know, is the only thing the left wants to talk about after a terrorist attack or after anything like this involving somebody with brown skin is, oh, well, we must be careful about Islamophobia. Why? It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. You know, our buildings are getting blown up. Our women are getting raped. Islamophobia is not high on my list of priorities.
And on that note, even though I don't have not a really good segue, did want to switch gears because
I can't think of one either, so don't worry, mate.
Oh. Hey, look at that!
We talked about France, and the hashtag is in France.
Well,
and here's another hashtag.
Here's my Milo.
He nailed it.
Since we do have Milo, we figured we need to ask him about his little argument with pretty much everyone on Twitter, or at least half of Twitter.
No, I don't have an argument with everyone on Twitter. I only have an argument with Twitter.
With Twitter itself, okay. What happened and why is it happening?
I was punished because Twitter doesn't like me. They stripped my lofty verified status from me, which indicates people of note. And if you're a journalist, it's kind of like the cheap, easy way to get verified because your publication will do it for you. Because they have obviously an interest in protecting their reputation and people impersonating their reporters. But if you're a public figure like me, you know, you get it for being famous and popular, and because people are impersonating you. Now, I'm probably one of the most impersonated people on the internet. Mostly out of affection, granted, but it's very confusing. It's particularly confusing now. They stripped my verification basically as a slap on the wrist because they don't like me. They don't like my jokes. You know, the left doesn't know how to deal with a gay guy who, you know, is conservative, a gay guy who doesn't sign up to all of the sort of progressive feminist craziness. They just don't know how to handle it. It's one of the reasons I'm as effective as I am. And perhaps why I scare them as much as I do, although I think I'm lovely. And anyway, so they stripped me as a sort of slap on the wrist. And it sent a very serious signal. It said that Twitter was prepared to use a mechanism that was designed to verify someone's authenticity to ensure that the public knew that they were speaking to the real person. And for example, if a source is DMing me, to be sure that privilege was in place. There are legal implications too, you know, when journalists are concerned. And all sorts of other things. That they were going to use it as an ideological weapon. And we've seen this before, that the direction of censorship and of punishment always flows in one direction. It's only ever conservatives. Progressives can say kill all white men with impunity. You will never, Twitter has never and will never ban anyone from its network for saying kill all white men. You say kill all Muslims, you're banned tomorrow. You know, this is not even in question. Twitter is now an actively progressive engine of propaganda, and I say that with no hint of exaggeration. They have made a decision. They have decided what side they're on in the culture wars.
But did you ever They sent you an email saying, like, based on your past actions, have they ever
what
so
the
far
left-
given you some details?
No, of course not, and they never will, because they can't, because there isn't anything. Because what the left has done is repackaged criticism and ridicule, and I engage in both of those things all day, every day, and being as they are essential parts of our discourse, of our national life, of the history of free thinking and free thought and intellectual debate. They've repackaged them as abuse and harassment, and they are, of course, nothing of the kind. Now, this is a remarkable thing. They didn't realize, I don't think, the extent of my fan base and how motivated and they can be when they get activated and upset about something. I mean, you know, this has been written up in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know when this show goes out, but I'll have been on Fox Business this week. This is having serious implications. Twitter's stock is down relative to the market for no other particular reason than what's been happening with me. I probably cost Jack Dorsey, I think, 600 million if my calculation of his share value is right.
Over a blue check mark.
Over a blue check mark. And what they did was very, very, very stupid. This was a calculated decision of theirs. They thought, right, let's pick a conservative. We're going to go for him. And we're going to strip his verification away. They knew it was a political move. And I think it was them testing the water. Like, let's see what happens when we do this. And the reaction has been gigantic from all sides of the political spectrum, from journalists, from comedians, from ordinary people all over. They're like, you cannot do this. You know, what they've done is they've lowered my standing in searches, for instance, because now I'm, you know, I don't pop up to the top of searches or whatever. So in effect, when there's a debate happening, by and large, the journalists who are, let's say there's a debate about the wage gap, by and large, the journalists who will be defending the fallacious, lie-ridden status quo will be verified journalists from Vox and all the rest of it. And the conservatives who are coming with facts and studies, by and large, not verified. So this is one of the ways in which they, you know, that they can use to tilt the public debate. But here's the key thing. If Twitter has decided that it is going to be partisan, that it has picked a side in the culture wars, that it is going to go all in on identity politics, it's going to be pro third wave feminism, pro Black Lives Matter, pro all of this kind of stuff, it should be honest with its users, because this kind of opaque, the sort of opaque terms of service they have at the moment and arbitrary enforcement of them is destroying user trust in the platform. And this is at a time, let's remember, that Twitter stock is tanking, that the user base is leveling off, if not going down. I can't tell you the number of people, and it runs into the hundreds a month, who tell me that they've joined Twitter to follow me, because so many of my fans are channers and kids, and they're not really on Twitter because young people don't really use Twitter. Twitter's for 30-year-olds, really. And 22, I mean, I've probably, of my 140,000 followers, I've probably brought 60 of those to Twitter, like new customers to Twitter. You're welcome, Jack Dorsey. You know, I'm serious about this. And at a time when the platform is tanking, I think investors in Twitter are going to want to know, why, when the share price is down to 20 at all-time low, are you driving it further by politically machinating against one side of a political debate, effectively lying to your users, and doing this sort of petty politics stuff, driving more people away and undermining trust in the platform? Twitter I didn't quite believe people when they said that Twitter as a company was screwed because of the huge kind of buy-in from the media that it has. But now I'm starting to wonder, because if I'm first, and next it will be people like Ann Coulter, after that could be somebody from Fox News who makes the wrong joke. There are hosts at Fox News that make very near the knuckle jokes. It tends to be a Fox Business host. You know, they're a little bit less careful with what they say. They make some pretty near the knuckle jokes. Those guys could start losing verification. Some of them could get suspended. This is a declaration of war. Let's not underestimate what it means. It happened to be me, which was very, very unfortunate for Twitter, because they picked on the wrong homosexual, because I went to war on them, and they will never forget what happened here, because it has been a disaster for them. Been a total PR catastrophe.
I love the Popat article today about this whole thing, but also towards the bottom of the article, he was mentioning his own little private study, which he says he's been doing for so long now that he could actually kind of call it scientific, where he's found, as you said, that the left can absolutely put out death threats and have nothing happen. But then someone like you, or we saw it with Adam Baldwin, who can just simply criticize leftist policies, and they can be.
All he said was they were ugly. Adam Baldwin just said that, and he didn't even use that word. He just I think he said something like, "We're smarter and better looking," with a picture of like,
Yeah.
the ugly feminists and beautiful cultural libertarians. He literally just called someone ugly.
Right,
That's
exactly. So you can do something like that, and you can get suspended. You can lose your blue. Literally send a death threat to somebody who espouses conservative views, and you're totally fine. And
Yep.
that's what I found so astounding is this whole idea that the right and gamers are the ones that are doing the harassment, when really that was one of Andrew Breitbart's big things, was to retweet them and show them what they're doing. And Dana Lash still does that, and I don't actually get a lot of hates, but when I do retweet it.
I'm
But
very
you do that
depressed.
as well.
Very depressed by my haters. I get so much fan mail all day from all platforms. There's WhatsApp, email, Twitter. I don't get any good hate anymore. They're all so fucking terrible. They're all really lazy and unfunny. I used to have some good haters in England when I used to do TV shows about gay marriage, and people would email me and say, "Go take a bath with a toaster." And I was like, "Okay, that's funny. That's good. I like that. I'm going to share that."
You're trying. That's
well, I like to give.
You
I like to give the trolls a mark out of 10, you see, and I sometimes, if I've got time, if I'm in the car on the way back from the TV studio, I'll give them a mark out of 10. I'll give them some tips on how to improve next time, but the quality of trolling from the left is so low. It's literally just like, "You're a piece of human garbage, kill yourself." I'm like, again, really? Is that it? If I decided to be a troll, I'd be so much more creative than this. And I think that's part of what they hate, because you've got this sort of the right-wing trolley element. And let's remember, troll isn't a bad word. Voltaire was a troll. Let's not forget that Matt and Trey from South Park are trolls. I think Charles Johnson made that remark first, and he's quite right. These are important people in our culture. But the right has all of the clever, funny people now. It didn't always, but the side of the debate that isn't in power. The side of the debate that is the dissident, insurgent, naughty side that is fighting the establishment automatically attracts contrarian characters. I'm a perfect example. I probably could have gone either way, but I've ended up being a conservative largely because I'm a contrarian. Maybe, I don't know. But all of the interesting people on the internet are conservative these days, and they're funnier and cleverer and bitchier, and they win the arguments. And the left does what the left always does. It uses the tactics of tyrants. Time tested through the ages, which is shut it down, shut it up, throw it out the window.
Right. As soon as they've lost the argument, they call you a sexist or a racist or some other ist and move on.
Before they even start. Sometimes we don't even get to the argument. Sometimes, don't engage with him, he's a transphobe. So, but we're talking about the wage gap. Don't engage with him, he's a transphobe. But I want to talk about economics. No, transphobe. It's just amazing.
But to me, the thing that makes the least amount of sense with what Twitter's doing, and I was there for the original .com bust, because no one actually knows that they're investing in websites. No one knows what they do. We were in an office with like 80% salespeople. No one knows what they sold. All Twitter has
Beans? Was it Beans?
It was Beans.
Do you remember Beans?
Magic Beans.
This was a company called Snowball.com.
They sold snowballs.
It's already funny. It's already
over
funny.
The internet. 2 Eskimos.
Trust me, once the stock started snowballing. But the only thing that they have to sell is an audience for other people to sell things to. That's basically that's their trade. That's their product.
Mm-hmm.
To go through this much trouble to antagonize half of their audience.
Well, look, it's very simple. Twitter's done 2 things very wrong. One is they have misused a tool that was designed that I really needed, frankly. I continue to need. It's designed to authenticate the identity of public figures, and they've started now using it as a political weapon, and it's now a badge. It's now a pat on the head from Twitter. You're the right kind of person. You're the sort of person we like. And the second thing is they have stepped up their campaign to scrub opinions they don't like from the network more generally by banning more people, by suspending more people. They don't care about free speech. When Jack Dorsey went on stage in October and said that Twitter was going to be free expression central, he was lying. When he said when he gave a quote to Nick Bilton in the Hatching Twitter book and said that he wanted Twitter to be like a utility, he was lying. I don't remember the last time my water company called me up and said we're going to turn your water supply down because we don't like your opinions. They are lying when they tell you they care about free speech. They're lying to their users, and they've got to stop. And if they don't stop, the company is finished.
And since I'm going to end it there just because we're running out of time, and I just wanted to go around, get everyone's closing thoughts, literally about anything that you want to discuss. So, Milo, you first.
I think I'm done. Actually, I gave a little speech about the evils of Twitter. No, I mean the Cologne thing is interesting. I live in Europe. You guys don't, and I see some of this starting to happen in London already. I would say, if you. There's a huge populist moment happening that the elites can't stand, that the sort of people who write the New York Times and who work for BuzzFeed and Gawker don't like very much. The sort of people who might vote for Sanders, might vote for Trump. The people who are increasingly frustrated with the just brazen lies that the mainstream media tells you about immigration, about all sorts of things. They lied about the wage gap and rape culture, which we spoke on a little bit earlier today. But they also lie about immigration, and they also they've elevated to victimhood status some of the worst people in the world, and I don't just mean feminists. They've elevated to victimhood status, the people who do not deserve to be there, and who, frankly, if I have a message for America, speaking from Europe, thinking, I don't, as somebody who admires America, I don't want you to turn into Britain. So repeal Obamacare for a start, but also, I don't want, America to have this influx of people who are profoundly antithetical to the American way of life, are going to make things worse for women, worse for homosexuals, worse for minorities of all kinds, and who are going to destroy communities. You've already started to see it a little bit happen in Dearborn, in Michigan. If you want that picture for your whole country, then by all means do what Trudeau's doing in Canada. But if you don't, I think you need to think very carefully in the next election about the candidate you vote for and the person who is the most committed to resisting that incursion. Because let's be clear, that's what it is.
Ash?
Well, I'll kind of bring it, since State of the Union is tonight, just kind of saying we know what Obama's going to say. He's going to try and be positive and claim that the past 7 years has been a wonderful Candyland. But of course, he's going to say there's more work to do and that we must continue that. And I can already tell you that one of my takeaways from tonight is going to be that, narrative trumps facts, which is the liberal way all the time. But I think we're really going to see it in the State of the Union, where he's going to just put out things, especially on gun control. Gun control, I mean, it's one of those issues where if you look at the feminist rape culture, gender wage gap, those things, and you look at immigration, you look at things like Gamergate, one of the other areas that the media is just absolutely horrible when it comes to getting its facts right is guns. I mean, no one in the media shoots. They don't know anything about buying a gun, shooting a gun, owning a gun, any laws about guns. They know nothing. So they just keep parroting that you can go buy a gun like you can buy, what does Obama say, a carrot at the supermarket. This is not the case at all. You've got these feminists claiming, oh, we should have guns have the same rules as abortion. Well, you know what? That would make it easier to get a gun, where if you only had to wait 72 days instead of 7 days for your background check, that would be better. I mean, like, they have no concept of what it's like to be a gun owner or to purchase a gun or to shoot a gun, that they just come out with these demonstrably false things, and it's just actually quite hilarious, and yet they keep getting away with it. So it's just constantly this whole idea of narrative trumping fact, and I think American people really are starting to wake up to it. They don't believe anything that they read. They don't believe anything they see on Twitter, because false information travels so fast on Twitter, and I think people are just really getting sick of it. But I need them to. You guys are taking too long. So, I mean, that's great.
You touched upon the answer to your problems, of course, in your formulation, narrative trumps fact. You, of course, contained within that statement, have given us the answer to those prayers, the name of the next president of the United States who could save us all from everything. So, you know, I'm very, very pro that particular candidate.
You can say his name.
The Donald, gonna make America great again. Let's do it.
And on that terrifying note, for Milo, for Ash, for our super mega producer whose email I just read 2 minutes ago, and for our Boston Peel leader Brandon Morris, who's waiting anxiously for us to call him and say the show went off splendidly. This has been another episode of the EveryJoe podcast. Check us online, www.everyjoe.com, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.